Welcome to FPTV New Releases, and welcome to Forbidden Planet's mighty head book buyer, Laura Dodd. How are you doing, Laura?
Very well, thank you. In head office today. So
yeah, in our gloriously appointed head office with a Dalek to Victory poster behind you and the Hulk poster behind you as well.
Yeah, I mean all the greats and Zelda, of course.
A wealth of riches there, and our special guest today is Anna Stevens. How are you, Anna?
I'm very well, thank you. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, it's great for joining us, actually, and you are also in head office while we're having this conversation.
I am, yes.
Yeah. You are sitting where I normally
by
sit.
the width of a wall.
Yeah, nice one. Thanks so much for joining us, and we're here to talk about your epic new novel, The Stone Knife, which Laura is a huge fan of, and I know is brimming with questions to ask you about. So, Laura, let's get right into it, mate.
Of course. So, what can you tell us about The Stone Knife?
Okay, it's the first in the Songs of the Drowned trilogy, which is a brand new epic fantasy trilogy. I know that my first trilogy was classed as grimdark. I'm not entirely sure whether you would class this one as grimdark. In my mind, possibly not, but I mean, who am I to judge? I just wrote the thing. It's got some of the same sort of similarities as the Goblin trilogy. It's a story of conquest and war, and characters who are on both sides of the conflict. So there's not really any cut and dried good guys and bad guys again. This one is slightly different in that it focuses quite heavily on colonialism and empire, and the sort of insidious evils that go with thinking that you are better than the people around you, and that everything you are doing is for their own benefit. And you know, if they just shut up and let you steal their land and enslave them, then you know they'll thank you for it in the end, sort of thing. So yeah, it's quite epic in scope. It's definitely the most ambitious book I've written to date. And it's also the fattest. It's a very fat book by my former standards.
How many pages is it, Anna?
It is. I will tell you precisely.
It's so good that you've got copies there with you, because normally when you put authors on the spot like that inadvertently, it's like, oh man, I wouldn't know either. But it's good that you've got it to hand.
It's 593.
Yeah, there we go. And it seems to me that the theme is supremely timely. With strange reflections for our own society.
Yeah, it's a bit of a strange one that, you know, I was jumping around with ideas back in 2018. This was the one that I kept on returning to. And I suppose maybe, you know, around about 2018, you could see that certain politicians in the West were slipping more to the right, shall we say. So that might have informed why I decided to go down this route. But for it to be coming out in 2020 does seem like weirdly timely. So yeah, I don't know, maybe I'm secretly psychic and I can see the future. Who knows?
I'm sure that's undoubtedly true. You know, so the impending collapse of society is not something one wishes to be played with prophetic dreams of, but it's kind of inescapable at the moment, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can't pretend that what's happening is not happening at the moment. You know, it's us, it's America, it's, you know, France, it's just everywhere in the West at the moment. So yeah, it all sort of came together time-wise with this book and this year all happening at the same time. So you know, hopefully it's still a bit of escapism. It's not quite as awful as 2020 has been. That's what I'm praying for anyway, is that people do actually take at least a little bit of entertainment from it, but we'll see what happens.
And I hear it says bloody as the Goblin trilogy. Is that even possible?
I would argue against that. There's no that scene for definite. There's nothing like that scene in this book. It is a novel about war and conquest, so obviously, you know, bad things happen and a lot of blood gets spilt. But it's the whole thing is that there's a bigger scope to it. You know, we've got magic, we've got monsters, which, you know, didn't feature in the Gobline trilogy at all. So that gives you extra strands and extra themes to play around with. So I think that while there probably is quite a high body count, and, you know, there's probably a small lake of blood, but not necessarily quite as much blood as the Gobline trilogy. But again, I will leave that to readers to decide for themselves.
And I hear there's even some romance as well.
There is, you know me, I do actually have a soft spot, which I know a lot of people would you know, say was a foul lie, but is not true. So we've got an established married couple. We've got another couple who fall in love throughout the course of the book. It's been set up as a very gender equal society and a very queer norm society, which was a huge amount of fun to write, actually, because it was, well, I mean, what if there wasn't the patriarchy? What would that look like? You know, what if there was no homophobia? What would that look like as a society, as a culture? So writing all of that was really, really good. And it meant that you could have established romance, established marriages and relationships and stuff like that, but you could also have more casual encounters and people basically making passes at other people, but without there being any sort of stigma or any judgment and stuff like that. And it was so much fun to write, to just imagine a world where there is no, you know, you just like, well, if you fancy someone, you ask them out. If they don't fancy you, they say no. And it's not necessarily to do with your gender or your orientation or anything like that. It's just, I like you too, or I don't like you, and that's that. And it was really nice. And yeah, I mean, I think maybe the romance might be slightly more overt in this one than it was. Obviously, in the first trilogy, it developed over the course of 3 books for pretty much all of the couples that ended up in relationships in that trilogy. This one, because we've already got an established relationship, so it is probably a bit more overt from the start. But yeah, it's nice. It's nice to temper the gore with some softness.
And I like as well, so we interviewed Alex Myers the other day for The Story of Silence, which is obviously another fantastic Harper Voyager title. Mm-hmm. And we were talking about the idea of kind of music and languages, which is very relevant to the Stone Knife as well. So what can you tell us about kind of that element of the book, especially the kind of siren songs and that type of thing?
Yeah, okay. So I wanted to play around with magic this time, because I didn't really use magic last time around. So I was thinking about how, you know, what kind of magic could we do and how might it work? And I came up with the idea of the Empire of Songs, who have song magic. And it's a sort of, once you step over the border into their land, you start to hear music. And it's this music that pervades absolutely everything, and it never stops, and you can never not hear it. But also the magic comes from the singer, who's basically like the top dog. And he filters his emotions through the song, so that he kind of helps build like a cohesive society, which is what the Empire is, and it's what the Empire wants to bring everyone else into the song. But obviously, if the singer is angry, for instance, then the song might be angry, which might mean that people's emotions are affected slightly within the borders of the Empire. So there are a lot of rituals surrounding the singer, where the singer must always be happy. The singer must only ever be surrounded with beauty and peace, and, you know, the best of everything, the most exquisite paintings and art, and, you know, all of this kind of stuff. So it's the story of what happens. It's partially the story of what happens when the singer gets exposed to different things and negative things, and how that impacts not just him, but how it impacts the entire society that has been created around him and his song. So that was really important. And then there's also the Drowned, who are the series title is The Songs of the Drowned, and they are a sort of amphibious monster that is somehow linked to the Empire of Songs, but we don't know how. But they're quite humanoid creatures that live in the rivers and lakes, and if they sing, you're right, they're very much like sirens. They're absolutely irresistible, and you will literally just walk into the water and they will tear you apart and eat you. So some of the protagonists that we've got on the other side from the Empire of Songs, they have developed a type of warrior who takes a different type of magic, and it deafens them for a period of time. So what they hear is they hear the sound of the spirits rather than anything else, and that deafens them to the songs of the drowned, which allows them to then go and draw water, because obviously without water everyone's going to die. So
could I ask you, that sounds absolutely fascinating. Could I ask you a question about that, which is, when you are building a narrative like that and you're kind of world building, what's the process? What comes to you first? Is it the characters within the setting? Is it the setting that you build? Is it the rules and the fabric of that society? How do you approach that narrative?
For me, it's always character first. I don't know. I never have an idea for a story. I just I start thinking of and almost like meeting characters, and I start hearing characters' voices in my head. I know that sounds insane, but I do literally get voices in my head. In the case of the stone knife, the very first thing that happened that sort of set me on the path to this story was I got an image of a pair of bare feet in standing on really rich black soil next to a river, and that went on to become the character Shessa, who is one of my main protagonists. So from having that image, I knew that I was going to have a character that was living in an environment that was warm enough for them to go barefoot, and that water was going to play a really incredibly important part in their society. And so from there, the character of Shessa began to develop. And then once I knew who she was, I could place her in an environment. And then from there it was, okay, so what is going to be the challenge? Who is going to be her antagonist? What is going to be the issue? And what is going to be the journey that she goes on? And so from those questions, you then sort of build out in layers until you end up with at least the skeleton of a world. And then once you've got that, you can start jamming all the cool stuff in.
Oh, that's so interesting. And in fact, we have blazed through most of our time together, Anna. So
okay.
I know that's how quickly it goes when people come up with really interesting stuff. And Songs of the Drowned is such a great umbrella title for this series. It's beautiful. Has that wonderful lyrical quality to it. And I can't wait to read the book myself. I know that Laura's a big fan. And thanks so much for coming and hanging out with us in the office, no less, Anna. Thanks for your time.
I know. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And stay safe, everyone.
and you can order the stone knife from the links attached to this video also. What's that?
Signed edition. Signed.
Oh, yeah, there we go. So very good. Signed edition, very important. Look, that's right, because that's why you're with us, aren't you? You're actually signing the books. Yeah, fantastic, even better. We know we've got the stock this time, Laura. That's the key.
It's downstairs.
I was a bit gun shy, Sometimes I say these things, and afterwards I'm like, is that actually true? Do we actually have the signed book? Yeah. So signed books from the link attached to this video. Thanks so much for joining us, Anne. It's really lovely to meet you.
Thank you. And you. Thanks very much.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.